Hello everyone and welcome to this presentation. Today we're going to talk about the presentation slide that I chose out of my own, which is called video editing. Now keep in mind, for the sake of this presentation, this is going to be for educational purposes only. We're going to be covering some of the objectives pertaining to video editing and how it works. And before we get started, I'd like to introduce myself. As some of you are undoubtedly aware, my name is Daniel L. Turner. I do go by the stage name of Mr. Turnaround on my YouTube channel, but I am the owner and founder of Turnaround Productions, and my main occupation is being a musician and video editor. I also earned a certificate in media communications from Full Sail University, of course. I also make beats in the genres of hip-hop, rap, and R&B on FL Studio 20. Now, I've been my own musician and had my first keyboard since 1981, and by 2002, I started learning how to make beats using FL Studio of every version. The only version I have not used thus far is FL Studio 20. So altogether, I've been a musician for almost 38 years. Also on the side, I am a video editor, and I have a background in operating a camera, and I've been doing that for the last 12 years. Now, one of the main video editing software programs out there, in my opinion, has to be Adobe Premiere Pro. Now, I've been using Adobe Premiere Pro, I guess, for the last 8 years since it has been out. I think it's one of the best video editing software programs out there for Mac and PC. I also can specialize in working on 2 video effects for music videos, such as random crop to the beat and the flicker effect. And last but not least, I am also a rapper, singer, songwriter, composer, arranger, and producer. And that's all in the category of music, if you will. And like I said, I've been doing that for quite a long time, and I enjoy doing what I do. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started on the presentation for video editing. These are our objectives pertaining to this presentation. Number 1, we're going to talk about identifying the differences between linear and nonlinear editing processes. Number 2, summarize the creation and the use of an edit decision list. 3, explain the considerations related to editing and action. 4, recall the application of edit transitions. And last but not least, summarize the steps involved in nonlinear editing. So what is the definition of linear editing? Well, linear editing is the process of selecting, arranging, and modifying images and sound in a predetermined ordered sequence. The next clip I'm about to show you here is one example of linear editing. In this slide that I'm showing you here, this is one particular example of linear editing. It is simple and inexpensive. There are very few complications with formats, hardware conflicts, etc. For some jobs, linear editing is better. For example, if all you want to do is add 2 sections of video together, it is a lot easier to edit tape to tape than to capture and edit on a hard drive. That's an example of linear editing. What is the definition of nonlinear editing? Well, nonlinear editing is a video or audio editing system that performs non-destructive editing on source material. The name is in contrast to 20th century methods of linear video editing and film editing combined. The next slide I'm about to show you will be an example of non-linear editing. Now, this next slide I'm showing you are 2 images concerning the example of non-linear editing. In this case, it is a form of audio, video, and image editing in which the original content is not modified in the course of editing. Instead, the edits are specified and modified by specialized software. Now let's talk about the difference between pre-production and post-production. Pre-production is a noun meaning the process of planning some of the elements involved in a film, play, or other performance. And the next slide will show you some examples of pre-production. Now, this next particular slide is very important. These are a couple of examples concerning pre-production. On one image, you have the checklist, and on the other, which is considered the workflow. Now, the checklist for pre-production you have on one column, and on another column, you have your production and post-production and your first review to final delivery on the other column. And on the first review to final delivery, you have to incorporate feedback from review and create final videos and so on. Now, what is the definition for post-production? Well, I'm glad you asked. It is also considered as a noun, meaning work done on a film or recording after filming or recording has taken place. And on the next slide, you'll see a couple of examples on images for post-production. This is an example of post-production. You have the 12 stages: 1, the idea; 2, development finance; 3, script development; 4, packaging; 5, finance; and 6, pre-production; 7, the shoot; 8, post-production; 9, sales, marketing, exhibition, and so on. And on the next one on the right is a typical type of timeline concerning the post-production. Now notice this video right here. This is the before shot. Notice my left hand is off track, trying to deal with the rain, which is considered an element. What's missing here? Anyone? That was the before shot. That was pre-production. My left hand was way off track trying to keep up with the rain and which direction it was supposed to go. Now take a look at the after. Now, notice the after result. Watch my left hand again. See how it's following the rain? That's the final result. Now that's the post-production. That, in other words, the final cut or the final result pertaining to the video. Now this next slide I'm going to show you are 10 tips on how to edit your videos. Number 1, choose the right software. The first step in improving your video editing process is to choose the right software for you and your work. They normally offer everything you need to perform standard video edits, but you may prefer one over others for their usability, digital interface, and features. The next tip is use a fast computer. No, we're not about to pit PCs against Macs in this section, but you can choose whatever computer brand or model you want, as long as it's fast enough for you to store huge files and allows you to focus more on your editing work without having to worry about slow recording. Tip number 3, edit for a story. One of the most important takeaways in this case is to remember your creative goal. To tell a great story, go beyond the basics, cutting away extraneous footage and correcting the order of your clips, and take the opportunity to make your film aesthetically pleasing and dramatically compelling so as to evoke the right emotions and effectively impart your intended message. Tip number 4, maintain an efficient workflow. Even with a super fast computer system and editing software, you'll also need to be systematic and organized in order to become a more efficient editor. Another way that you can work faster is to use an external hard drive for storing your footage, so you can free up more computer memory. Tip number 5, utilize keyboard shortcuts. Speaking of buttons, keep in mind that most editing programs allow you to use keyboard shortcuts to perform a range of in-app editing functions. If you have a little more money to spend, the easier option would be to purchase an editing keyboard that already has keyboard shortcut icons in them. Tip number 6, learn important terms. The video editing industry will require you to communicate with other video editors or clients, which means that you'll have to learn a lot of lingo. To those who haven't heard of them, some of the terms used in video editing can be impossible to figure out without any research, which is why you'll want to learn them early on. Tip number 7, color correct your clips. Color is a major design element that can be manipulated to highlight certain subjects, evoke specific emotions, and set the mood or atmosphere of your scene. Fortunately, today's video editing programs gives us a lot of color editing options that used to be only possible with photos. Tip number 8, select good music. Don't just focus on the visuals. It should only be as good as your music. If you're creating a drama film, for instance, you'll want just the right song or instrumentals to make key moments more effective. Cheerful comedies can be a little forgiving, but it can also be easy to overdo it with upbeat songs. But before you even think of using just any music, remember that the safest option is to get music from a royalty-free music provider. Tip number 9, add text and graphics. Now, depending on your film type, you may have to include more text aside from the title, opening, closing billboards for broadcasting, and film credits. You'll usually want to keep it simple, but with the clean and white sans serif, which is a default font in my opinion, doesn't grab too much attention. Have them dissolve in and out and see how it works in your film. Now, before we wrap it up in the summary of this slide, I forgot to mention one other tip, and that was tip number 10, which is export web versions, such as any social media platform like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Those would help along the way. Now let's review what we've learned throughout this summary concerning the presentation. We've learned the difference between linear and nonlinear editing. We've also learned the difference between pre-production and post-production. We've done a before and after video pertaining to this presentation. We've given a couple of examples on the visual elements concerning linear and nonlinear editing, along with pre-production and post-production. And last but not least, we've also given 10 additional tips on how to edit your videos. In other words, how to make your videos more realistic and more interesting. I hope that this was an interesting presentation. I hope you guys got a good understanding out of it. If you want to follow me on all social media sites, please by all means follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and on the Triller app, all at Turnaround for Real. That's Turnaround the number 4 and Real. And also follow me and add me as a friend on Snapchat at Mr. Turnaround. I'll be sure to follow you guys back. Thank you for watching this presentation. Y'all have a good evening.